Welcome everybody to the Chess Lab. In this video I want to show you a game played by Magnus Carlsen in the title Tuesday. This game is a 3 minutes plus 0.6 seconds of increment per move. Magnus Carlsen in this title Tuesday was on fire. He won 10.5 out of 11. That half point that he didn't manage to convert in a full point, it's this game. And the reason why he didn't manage to win this game is because at some point, yes, it was a completely winning position for Black, who is Magnus Carlsen, but the move that was required to be found in order to win is, to say the least, extremely creative. But again, is to say the least. So I want to give you a chance to enjoy this game, which I'm briefly going to show you just for context. But most importantly, I want you to enjoy the interested position, and why not, you may have a shot at finding the winning move that Magnus missed. So let's go. e4 by Hikaru, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, so Hikaru chooses the Ruy Lopez or Spanish against Magnus. Again, I want to emphasize Magnus is on fire here. I think that this was round 8, if I'm not mistaken, and Magnus was on 7 out of 7. It was something unbelievable. So, you know, it's not like one weak, tired Magnus. No, we are talking about in-shape Magnus. So, okay, a6, bishop a4, knight f6. These moves are all very standard. If you don't know this opening, just that you know, Magnus is just developing his pieces very naturally. And Hikaru is doing the same. Of course, every time you take a central pawn here, you have problems. White can just castle and then put a rook on the e file, or there are some ideas. You can never take the pawns for free, just that you know. So castle, bishop e7, rook to e1 defends the pawn. The bishop gets kicked out, bishop b3, castle. This is all very standard stuff, as you can see. You should be able to see the timestamps here. This is the time the player used, right? And they just used 1 second. So they're playing extremely fast. Again, this is standard theory. c3, the idea is to go d4 in the future, but now d5. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this should be called the Marshall Gambit or something. I'm not super sure. Yeah, this is the Marshall attack. I just checked here in the Lichess database. Okay. So here White will win a pawn, however Black gets a lot of initiative, and that's the point of the Marshall. Fun fact, I don't know if this is the exact position, but the concept of the Marshall was played, I think, for the first time by a guy named Marshall, right? Very, very unexpected. And he played it against... I don't want to say something completely outrageous, but I think that's correct. He played it against Capablanca, and Capablanca won. I'm not like super sure, but I think that's the case. But eventually, okay, people realized that there was something to it, and it became quite popular. It's still popular to these days. So, okay, e takes d5, so White wins a pawn, but Black takes it back. So in this moment, material is equal. Knight takes e5, here we go. White just won a pawn. Now Black takes the knight, White takes the knight, so they traded a couple of pieces, but White is still up a pawn, so if you count material, you have the 3 pawns here on the king side, 3 pawns here on the king side, but look at that, these are 4 pawns, whereas Black only has 3. So there is this extra pawn for White. However, and not only that, this knight is under attack, right? So it seems like White should be easily winning, but again, this is just an illusion. After bishop to b7, this move not only develops a piece, but also defends the knight, but also in the future, there is some pressure over to this king. And if you start to look at this position a little bit more carefully, you realize that, hold on a second, this rook is exposed, is gonna be attacked, and this can create some very nasty ideas. Also, these 3 pieces are still in their starting squares, and it's not so easy to develop this knight, right? You don't want to develop it here because it doesn't really have a future. So while Black has all of the minor pieces developed, White is still struggling a little bit. But okay, let's see how this specifically develops. Here Hikaru plays d4, and now bishop to f6. If you go bishop to d6, there are some lines where maybe, you know, bishop takes can be played, and after you take here, something like this. I mean, it's not so simple. After bishop d6, perhaps even rook takes d5. Let's just look at it briefly. Again, I told you that I wanted to show you this fast, but okay, this is an interesting moment. You may want to know why Magnus didn't go for this apparently monstrous double bishop conformation. Well, bishop takes d5. Rook takes d5 actually also wins. I'm checking at the engine here with Lichess. Bishop takes d5, and I mean, if you take bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, bishop takes h2, king takes h2, queen takes d5. I don't want to put it on the board. I would like you to try to visualize, but in the end, again, I'm checking with the engine, knight d2 with the simple idea of just reinstitute this knight into society. And white has two minor pieces for a rook, but these two rooks, despite the white pieces are a little bit underdeveloped, are also underdeveloped themselves, so that would be much better for white. And if instead you decide to take this rook, I mean, just bishop takes b7, and yeah, rook b8 attacks this bishop, but you can just go back, bishop to f3, which defends the queen, so this is now a threat, so you have to move. And here again, you have two minor pieces for the rook, and after knight to d2, which tries to bring the knight to a more active square, perhaps even to c5 to really target those weaknesses, white is actually completely winning. Not to mention, again, there is still this one pawn up. So I just wanted to show you this line to showcase why bishop d6 is not good. It just doesn't work tactically. So bishop to f6, but again, you have all of these three pieces beautifully developed. This rook is now hanging, and I mean, what do you do? Well, rook to e1, this is the best move. It doesn't look great, but again, it's the best move. And yeah, now simply rook to e8. You may be surprised by this move, but this is a principle in chess, meaning is a general guideline. It doesn't necessarily always work, but it's good to know. In this position here, if you look at white, you basically have only two pieces that are doing something. This bishop is looking at a decent diagonal, and this rook is looking at a decent open file. So in situations where your opponent has a bunch of pieces undeveloped and only one or two pieces developed, a good idea is to trade those good developed pieces. And this is what Magnus does, and in this position all of a sudden now Magnus doesn't really change his situation because this rook was really doing nothing compared to this one. So trading those two rooks in general simply makes black still have his three pieces out, but now instead of having two decent pieces, well, white has only one, right? And after bishop takes d5, which is a questionable decision, the engine doesn't really like that too much. Now is minus 0.2, which is still equal, but considering that white is up a pawn, but the evaluation is minus 0 point something, it shows you that when it comes to piece activity, is black the one doing something? These two pieces are developed. Well, these two pieces are not. For this rook, it's not going to be so hard to come into the game. Meanwhile, for this rook is a little bit difficult. It's not easy for white to trade this queen to reduce the potential dynamism that black has, because how do you trade the queen? You're getting checkmated. So yeah, it's not easy for white. Knight to d2, this is logical. Now b4. Interesting move. Again, this is, in the end, this is just a 3-minute game, so we can't really stay here to criticize too harshly. b4 is interesting, of course. If you take this pawn, you may or may not lose this one, right? And then the rook will just be very strong. You can always play a5 or c5 to target those weaknesses, and these two bishops will be monsters on both sides of the board. That's why Karu tried to play against these bishops, c4, bishop back to e6, keeping the bishop close together, and they are again targeting this queen side. I know this video is about something else, but I'm taking some time because it's really instructive how usually in the martial you have this notion of creating some big attack over to the kingside, but here Magnus is actually doing what the position demands, which is the professional and strong player approach, which is the position demands some pressure over here, and that's why Magnus keeps this bishop on this diagonal and he doesn't put it, for example, here on the other diagonal. This would be a little bit a discoordination between the bishops, believe it or not. So very, very instructive by Magnus Carlsen here, nonetheless, despite the 3-minute time control. d5, yes, it opens up this bishop, but on the other hand, again, these two bishops were really, really powerful together, so at least now this bishop is a little bit shut down. Bishop f5, look at this, keep this pressure, really, really beautiful stuff. And here, knight to f1. I mean, you kind of have to do something. The knight may go here or here. Targeting this bishop, gaining a tempo is an okay move. Queen to e4 now by Magnus. You know, just gaining space, targeting this pawn. And now knight to g3 or knight to e3 is still very effective. But, you know, perhaps this bishop is defended, even though after knight to g3, both of these pieces are now hitted, and Magnus plays queen to d3. So Magnus' idea was to trade the queens. Now, if you trade this bishop, you lose the game on the spot because the queen is hanging. On the other hand, if you trade queens, which was not played in the game, Hikaru opted for queen to b3, which is okay. If you trade queens, Magnus of course saw this from the distance. Now after bishop takes d3, you keep these strong bishops. Again, the queen was perhaps not a developed piece because it was in the beginning square, but it was active nonetheless because at least it controls some squares, also the light squares, which the queen couldn't access, but they were useful to black. So again, this idea of white has only two pieces developed, let's trade one, right? Which is the queen, which sounds a little bit paradoxical almost because you want to keep the queen to have activity, but again, the strength of these players of Magnus level is flexibility of mind, and they know when to switch. In this case, he would have just switched to a favorable endgame where he has the bishop pair on a semi-open position. There's just one pawn in the center, in the two center columns. And, you know, c4 is under attack, can't be defended by b3 unless you want to hang your rook. You are free to do that. The knight is actually quite restricted by this light square bishop, which is opposed to it, and you can easily see something like this. The knight can't even interpose because this square is controlled 2 times. It's tough. The engine is just saying minus 0.7. You have to immediately play knight h5 to immediately go after this bishop, and but after bishop to d4, I'm looking at the engine line. I mean, these things are falling, and then you have a 3 against 2 with the bishop pair. So as you can see, Marshall had a point, you know. But that's why Hikaru declines this trade. Now the point is that after queen takes b3, at least Hikaru gets to activate this rook a little bit artificially, but nonetheless. Magnus goes for it. Again, Magnus is not scared of entering endgames, as we know. So queen takes b3, a takes b3, and now if I ask you what's the main weakness in this position, you can even stop and take this question seriously, but okay, I'm just gonna go with the flow. The main weakness is this b3 pawn. Also, this b2 pawn is a weakness, so if you said the b2 pawn, that's also okay, but it's easily defendable because white has a dark square bishop. However, white doesn't have a light square bishop. In these cases, you say that if you have a bishop pair your opponent doesn't, the bishop that your opponent doesn't have, you say that your bishop is unopposed. And it's going to be extremely difficult for white to save the light squares in this specific instance. And that's why Magnus immediately goes for bishop c2. It's easy, right, when you see Magnus do it and when you get the explanation, but to be able to create those possibilities in your own games is of course extremely hard to do. That's why Magnus is Magnus, no? So okay, knight h5 now. Again, Hikaru with this very good idea of trying to go for this bishop. Yes, even giving away maybe even a couple of pawns, but again the position is quite desperate. However, these are very good moves still, and the position is just minus 0.1, which is basically equal. Now bishop to d4, Magnus keeps the bishop pair and keeps this knight now all of a sudden just randomly on the edge of the board. So that's doesn't look good. Bishop to e3, again Hikaru insisting on trading this bishop, and here there is a little bit of a trick by Hikaru. Magnus correctly playing one of the best moves, which is bishop takes e3. You may say, what about bishop takes b2? It seems awesome, right? You are hitting the rook, all of these squares are controlled, you have this bishop pair beautifully aligned, but be careful into aligning pieces like that, because after rook a2 you have an unpleasant surprise, and because the position is so overwhelming, here you can kind of get away with certain ideas, but this is all of a sudden plus 1.5 for white. The tables have turned, and of course this is something that Magnus avoids. So bishop takes e3, f takes e3, bishop takes b3, so Magnus wins back the pawn. Remember, white has been up a pawn the whole game, so now material is equal. However, the position is also equal and quite crazy. Now I'm gonna do something quite interesting. Again, this is an equal position, white has to be very careful, but black also has to be careful not to get bank rank checkmated. Meanwhile, white doesn't have this problem. So I'm gonna turn off the engine actually, and I'm just gonna go a little bit further. So there is rook c1, we have a5. Now Magnus' idea is to simply push these pawns up the board. The position is still equal though. Knight to f4, of course this knight was doing nothing and Hikaru needs to bring it back. a4, Magnus is going. Knight to d3, which attacks this sensible point to b4. Now there is a little bit of tactics, so a3, nothing to be scared of, but you know, a3, here if you take these... If you take this pawn, both you have to calculate a takes b2, that looks very dangerous, attacking the rook, but also very simply, you know, you may just want to push, right? You're threatening to promote. Maybe this doesn't work, but still you will have a pawn on a2, which is very difficult to move, and you have all the time in the world to gobble all of the pawns, but probably after knight here just taking, right? So, you know, b takes, knight to c5, hitting the bishop, rook to b8, defending the bishop. Now if you take this bishop, rook takes b3, and you keep this strong pawn, you are attacking here, you are threatening a2, rook to b1, so white has to be careful, but white plays rook to a1, and in this position is just equal. Magnus plays bishop takes c4, which is a great move, and this is equal. Rook takes a3, bishop takes d5, and the position fizzles out because here black again can't move this rook, so he has to lose a tempo to kinda fix his bank rank problems, and the position is gonna be a draw. In fact, if I go back, right, in this position, bishop takes c4, if I turn on the engine, this is equal. Yes, the engine is saying minus 0.4, but if you put it into a deeper, stronger engine, is gonna tell you 0, 0, 0. However, I lied to you. I lied to you guys, because if I turn off the engine again and I go back just one move after Hikaru played rook to a1, if I turn on the engine here, again, Magnus played bishop takes c4, we saw this is equal. If I turn on the engine here, look at the bar. It skyrockets. Now you can only see the bar, you can't look at the evaluation. I'm gonna tell you the evaluation is minus 4.6. It's basically minus 5. It's completely winning for black. Okay, now it's funny because Magnus, by playing bishop takes c4, which equalizes, plays the second best move according to the engine. So the reason why this is so winning for black is just for one move. And again, both Hikaru and Magnus completely miss this idea. If you look at the time used for move, per move I should say, from 43 seconds, Hikaru is down to 29, and here Magnus from 1 minute and 18 seconds goes down to 1 minute and 18 seconds, meaning he used Hikaru's time to think and then agreed with Hikaru that this was just a draw. So this idea that now you have the chance to find is so special in a way that both Hikaru, thinking for some time, and Magnus completely missed. And again, we are talking at a Magnus that is in great shape. He went 10.5 out of 11. This is the game he drew. This is the moment that he missed. Of course, you have an advantage compared to Magnus. You know that this is winning, which of course psychologically makes you think a little bit differently. I am sure that if Magnus had the evaluation bar, he would have just stopped for a second, and I'm sure he would have found it, because of course your brain starts to think in terms of elimination process, and he would have found it for sure. But he didn't have the bar, and so he thought it was a draw. So guys, feel free to stop the video, or wait that I drink my sip of water and try to find this absolutely brilliant move, having the advantage that, this move exists in this position. So go ahead. I actually took 2 sips of water. This is really fascinating position. I'm just gonna wait for a second, I'm just gonna look at it. It's truly a fascinating position. Okay, so you guys are ready? All right, first let's look at what doesn't work. Well, bishop takes c4, as we said, it's equal, and it's just a draw. You take this pawn, but white takes this pawn, then white has counterplay over to this pawn. In the end, you will reach an endgame where is this 3 against this 2, but I'm gonna show you the end of the game. But it's just equal. Black doesn't have enough power to create problems. Another move that you may think is a2, because in this position there is a problem. White is attacking this pawn, so you can't just do nothing. You have to do something. You can't just wait, right? It's not like a Zugzwang puzzle. Here white is actively threatening something. So for example, if you play a2, well, this is actually now winning for white, because knight takes b3, and which removes the defender of the pawn, and after rook takes b3, here the best move according to the engine is king f8, which tells you everything you need to know. But after rook takes b3, rook takes a2, and here the endgame is winning for white, because white is all of a sudden having a 2 against 1, right? And you cannot capture this pawn, because otherwise you're getting bank rank checkmated, and so black has to lose this crucial tempo with king f8. But after rook to a7, which plans to eliminate this pawn, so then white has a 2 against 0, which is of course, we don't even talk about that. This is just bad. The engine is giving c6, and now you can go rook a8 or d takes c6, and they're both completely winning. So that's not the right direction, but then you are left wondering, what do you do? White is just gonna take the pawn, and if you push it, which is the only way to defend the pawn, again we enter this variation, and if you play rook a8, which is the only other way to defend the pawn, just knight takes. You just hang a piece, and that's what Magnus and Hikaru assumed too, and they just went with it. Again, Magnus played the second best move. But here, and hopefully if you found it, and if you found it, well, congratulations to you, it was really a great find. Here there is an absolutely unbelievable move, which is the brilliant bishop to a2. This is not a joke. I know it sounds like a joke and I'm manipulating the engine somehow. This is not a joke. Bishop a2 wins. And it's funny because now that I put it on the board, I think that you start to see why. I don't even have to explain it. It's so brilliant. And the point, of course, is that, well, you are defending the pawn, but you are also defending the bishop from the knight. However, the bishop is now hanging. But, and this is something that I think by now you realize, if white takes, and this is the idea you have to find, you don't go rook b2, because this simply hangs the pawn, and then white is up a piece and he wins the game, but you go check first. And after king to f2, now you check again, and this is a fork, meaning white can't ignore you. If they move the king, you just take the rook, and then you still have this pawn, and you're gonna win. This 2 against 1 is now irrelevant. So they have to take, but now after a takes b2, there is no way for white to stop this promotion. And you're gonna make a queen. This is unbelievable. However, this is not even the most beautiful line in my opinion. I think the most beautiful line is after bishop to a2, which is brilliant. White can play king to f2. And is like, now there is no check. And the bishop is hanging. And this pawn is hanging. And if you play rook to b2, simply defending the bishop, well, this just stays equal, like rook to b2 and king f3, and there is nothing. King to b2 is actually a blunder. In this position here, again, I want to sum it up. After bishop a2 and king f2, there is another brilliant move, which is just insane. And perhaps this was what was missed, I don't know, which is rook to b1, which hangs the bishop again. Of course, if you take the rook, bishop takes b1, this pawn will just go. But if rook takes a2, now you have forced white to put the king and the rook on the same file, and so rook to b2 check forces the trade. It transposes back to the variation we just saw. After rook takes, pawn takes, there is no way to stop the pawn. And so in this position from the beginning, this absolutely phenomenal bishop to a2, and if king f2 you have rook to b1, which literally forces white to take your piece in order to get into this winning endgame. It's truly unbelievable. Bishop a2 is truly like, I don't know if it's one of the most beautiful moves I've ever seen, but definitely one of the most unexpected and brilliant, that's for sure. It's truly a move that is like, the bishop is hanging, the pawn is hanging, you want to save them, and also, you know, in endgames your brain wants to keep the pawn free, and here you are blocking it. This is not supposed to be good, and it's the best move, and it wins. It's unbelievable. And to me, the fact that after king f2, rook b1 wins, which traps the rook in the corner and forces the rook to take your piece with attack on the pawn, except it loses the endgame by force, I find it so fascinating. So much so that the number 1 and 2 in the world, they both missed it. I mean, this is insane. Of course, with more time on the clock over the board, they would have found it, don't get me wrong, but still, it's a move that, I mean, these guys are able to find crazy moves even with a few seconds. So the fact that they both missed it with like 30 seconds and 1 minute, to me still says something about the complexity and the level of unusual of this move. So okay, bishop takes c4. Now I'm just gonna show you the end of the game as completion, but you know, it's just a draw. Bishop takes c4. Perhaps even in another moment, black was winning and it was missed again, but it was much more one of those nuances. Here Hikaru is playing well, he sacrifices that pawn for this pawn, and this is, yeah, if you look at it, there are 3 pawns against 2. The bishop is stronger than the knight, but if there are pawns on both flanks, so I mean, is not enough. Of course, Hikaru has less time, and Carlsen, Magnus has a much easier position, so he pushes, right? Also, this was the game that... this was a nice tactic by Hikaru, by the way. If you take the knight, check, right? And at least you get rid of the knight, and this is really a draw. So that was a nice touch by Hikaru. This was the day that Magnus lost to Keimer in the freestyle chess in Fischer Random, you know. And So, people was saying, oh, he is pissed and all these things. That's funny. But yeah, he was playing phenomenal. Yeah, here Hikaru, I think that didn't manage to find the proper defensive maneuvers. Here he played rook to b4, which is not good. Here it should have played g4 check. And here basically forces the black king to either go back, but at that point you're gonna be kicked back even more and you're never gonna win this position, like ever in a trillion years. And if you take en passant, which is the only way to kind of keep it alive, where after king takes g3, this pawn is not going anywhere and this king is too active. Like you're not gonna win, and if you try to sneak by, there are many maneuvers to save this. The engine is giving rook to b8, but also rook to b1. And usually you either check from behind or from the side. The fact that the engine is giving both of these moves are equal, it's probably because everything is equal. I just want to check if this also equalizes. I'm not sure because... yeah, this doesn't work because of rook g2. Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure, and the king kind of gets backed in a bad way, and then all of a sudden this king is super active. So yeah, you have to still be careful, but okay, here Hikaru, of course, wouldn't just blunder something like this. He would just check or go back or something. But this was missed. Rook b4 was played instead, but this allows rook a3 check, king f2, e4. e4 is useful because here the king can't progress because of this rook. However, if you play f4, you give yourself the opportunity to go king to f4, and now this move doesn't work anymore because the en passant with check, now the rook defends the pawn that takes en passant. So here Magnus would just have 3 pawns alive against one that would be winning. So pushing the g-pawn is no longer viable. Rook b8 was tried, rook a2, and here is not so easy to find the right way to proceed. Magnus ended up playing rook a3, king f2, and here rook g3 throws away the advantage. But you see, this is a little bit of a different situation. Here is not about finding some absolutely insane move. In this position here, it's about calculating whether or not this wins. The evaluation bar after rook a3 still stay positive because again after here you repeat, the engine will take, right? But the idea is that you have to take here to win. If you just then go for another idea, as you saw, is a draw. So here is about the fact that they have very few seconds and you have to calculate a little bit far away. But there is no brilliancy here, So yeah, this was thrown, but it's different. Rook g3, just to show you, in this position here, you're supposed to play rook takes g2, but it's not easy because after rook to f8 check, let's say king to e5, rook to e8 check, king to f5. Well, here first of all, you could also repeat. So let's force black to find some other moves. Like you have to go somewhere else, buddy, like king to d5 perhaps, which with the idea of checking here. But this is now wrong, as you can see. So let's say king f6, okay, now this is a different move. Rook takes e4, right? And you have to realize that this endgame is winning for black, which, to be honest, after rook g3, okay, you can kind of realize this because you will win this pawn. But, when you have a few seconds on the clock, these endgames are tricky. Also, this king is way more active than this king, so maybe Magnus got a little bit confused in some lines. And yeah, he threw it away with rook a3. Here again, the engine is giving winning because you go for this line, right? But yeah, he confused himself a little bit, and this is enough for Hikaru to then draw the game. Here there is no way for Magnus to make progress, and he drew, and so instead of winning 11 out of 11, he went 10.5 out of 11. You may say big deal, but being Magnus, I'm sure that this is something that is one of those satisfaction things that he couldn't have this time. But nonetheless, in this position, I just wanted to leave you with this. Bishop a2, giving the bishop away, and in this beautiful line with king f2, you actually force white to take your bishop after rook to b1. I think this is a really beautiful move. Hopefully you appreciate that, you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your chess.